identification of the limitations to individual freedoms, freedom for all. Marxists, aware of their critical role in the spectrum of the left, tried to understand the relationship between political action and social constraints of capital that make certain political demands possible or necessary. Marx's idea of class struggle emerged from his observations of industrial capitalism and workers' reforms. The revolutionary Marxists, Vladimir Lenin, Rosa Luxemburg, in the early 20th century, critiqued the expanded role of credit and monopoly, extending imperialist enterprises' assault on the workers across the world, in a time when credit and monopoly seemed progressive to many social democrats. But by the time Trotsky of the 30s wrote on the failure of Stalin's socialism in one country, that is the confinement of socialism to one state over and against the international proletariat, it was unclear how to evaluate the politics of the USSR with respect to capital. History rendered a class basis for political action less salient, seemingly irrelevant, but it's not correct to say that it was lost. Modernization and industrialization, meanwhile, appeared culturally to exist apart from the international class character of anti-capitalism. In the end, it was Marxism, with it a cosmopolitan socialist workers' movement, and its relationship to the left that suffered. It lost its ability to consciously alter the course of history and signified a greater decline of the left. This was not an incidental occurrence, but a problem we still deal with. Marxist ideas set the political bar high because the workers built it that way. Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, 10 years later Muammar Gaddafi, were both modernizers. Nasser assumed power in 1956 and partly as an anti-imperialist gesture, nationalized the Suez Canal to the benefit of Egypt's industry. Nasser founded the Arab Socialist Union in 1962, which was to gain currency in Libya. One founding principle was that class struggle was not required for Arab socialism. Gaddafi's coup in 1969 was founded on his ever-evolving revolutionary theory, including Nasserist, socialist, and protectionist reforms. Gaddafi partially nationalized oil, made strikes illegal, and fashioned himself a pan-Arab socialist Muslim, an enemy of Islamist factions, including the Muslim Brotherhood. All this helped him consolidate his power that he transparently named power of the people. With iron fists, both Nasser and Gaddafi enacted modernizing measures that evoked certain socialist ideals. By that time, these were techniques that amounted to the ideological leveraging of Cold War blocs. It's no coincidence modernization was regarded as the right kind of revolution by Americans. Its socialist nationalism did not advance leftist politics, let alone socialist ideals, certainly not the ideals of a cosmopolitan socialist workers' movement. These modernizers, along with the world, suffered from the aching absence of Marxist critique. The people paid the price. Is a possibility that something, a political movement say, could be both anti-imperialist and completely regressive really inconceivable? This refers to Islamism, but also to its supposed opposite, modernization. If this dynamic is inconceivable, it is only because we are afraid of what it implies, since it implies the left is truly helpless. In that case, it doesn't know what to do, or where to begin, without the political ideology of anti-imperialism. But if we can conceive the contradiction, we can engage it as a problem. The left never got ahead by denying its own problems. The debate on the left on the NATO bombing of Libya suggested to some that perhaps anti-imperialist position is not enough, given Gaddafi's murderous repression of democratic protests. Others in the debate insisted that all forms of imperialism should be opposed by the left. This debate proceeded from an assumption of the complete incapacitation of the left, for it knows neither option will do a thing for Libya, the Middle East, or the world. The debate posed by Libya is another half-truth. It misrecognizes society like the left misrecognized Islamism. That is to say, what the debate could do at best is make the left reflect back upon its own politics to see its helplessness, the recurrent inadequacy of its anti-war, anti-imperialism. At the Left Forum not many weeks ago, Z Magazine editor Michael Albert took the opportunity on one panel to lament that no one was talking about the bombings that had started just that day. We should collectively go out and protest after the whole claptrap was over. Why did he feel this anxiety? Perhaps he sensed that even that moment would quickly recede from memory. For the left, anti-imperialism offers comfortable shelter from this anxiety. This shelter, Egypt could not provide. Too many unknowns and too many disappointments. I understand my time's up, but I'm going to finish this, please. Both imperialism and Islamism are fueled by class exploiters with class interests. But how do we prove this? The achievements of the Arab Spring have been stowed away from critical reflection thanks to a resurgence of imperialism or anti-imperialism. This exhibits the left's paralleling the bourgeois news media and a tailing behind of imperialism itself, a regretful failure indeed. It's a pity that Libya today marks nothing more than the point at which the international left abandoned Egypt. This could signify another concession to Islamists, and at the very least, a blow to any socialist workers' movement. For Marx and the revolutionary Marxists, the proletariat and its politics emerged from capitalism. Workers produced to extend capital at their own expense. Because of this, they could make a revolution. The left embodied a spectrum of ideas, and the Marxists pushed the ideas to their limits. We do need people capable of leading a workers' movement. We need a left, but the left needs Marxists. And we must first recover these questions in the face of a history that, with 9/11, came to a close, the history of the 20th century left. 25 years after Gaddafi came to power, in 1994, James Cameron's banal True Lies showed in a tacky manner how the threat of Muslim Arab terrorists with their Soviet warheads could put the thrill back in Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis's humdrum marriage. When this movie was released, most of us in Platypus were not old enough to view it alone, much less feel threatened by the Soviets in Afghanistan. Terrorists could resolve a marital midlife crisis in 1994. Today, such a plotline is probably not possible. The difference at the end to the 90s and the end to my generation's childhood arrived on September 11th. The 90s were evidently an era of freewheeling, neoliberalism, best years of my life, post-Cold War. It was a time that, as Marxist thinker Moïse Postone suggests, could have dispensed with the old political camps of the Cold War in favor of international politics of freedom. Instead, 9/11 grimly consecrated the failure to do this by effacing all semblance of the struggle for freedom from and through capital, that is to say, the left. In popular culture, every decade returns 20 years after its past. This is not a law of history, but it is a cheap, yet essentially demonstrable, version of Marx's observation that history repeats as a farce. A return of the 90s optimistic post-Marxism would gloss over 9/11, which made the alliance between the left and Islamism not less convincing, but more pathological. We might even get to see a sequel to True Lies. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, production of the sequel was canceled because, in Cameron's words, terrorism was no longer something to be taken lightly. The left is a historically specific mode of thinking, not a clique. Like other mentalities, it could become extinct. Marx knew the left was a force to be reckoned with, which is why it had to be ruthlessly critiqued. But a dead left is, as such, incapable of appraising itself. This includes Halliday, who made an important point, but whose thinking was perhaps necessarily limited by the image of Marxism after the Cold War. Yet the left in its struggle for freedom epitomizes eternal youth, the openness and truth of eternal youth, the swagger and thick head that goes with this. Its childhood is traumatic. No revolution has succeeded. Each failure brought worse repercussions. It failed to prevent World War I, and even degenerated into an apologia for Islamism at times. As Freud observed, those who retreat to the behavior of childhood struggle precisely as adults to conceal the trauma of their unfulfilled past impulses. As leftists rehearse the post-Cold War optimism and its leftover anti-imperialism, they show how old they are. Their arguments are tired, and their anti-imperialism simply ineffective. Platypus, on the other hand, did grow up in the anti-war movement's denouement, but it tries to recover the questions of Marxism that seem old. This is the power of its youth, but also its limit, for we too are growing up amidst a thoroughly anti-left history. I think the world can wait, if it must, for freedom. Indeed, the world, the masses of exploited people, taken as a whole and abstracted, can only wait. It does not wait to be illuminated by the left. The left must work to once again become a force of history to be reckoned with. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. Sansara Taylor is a writer for Revolution newspaper. She hosts WBAI's show called Equal Time for Free Thought. She's on the advisory board of World Can't Wait. She takes as her foundation the new Synthesis on Revolution and Communism developed by Bob Avakian. She was recently at New York University in her national tour